agreeing to disagree on Apple's cut and costs. This is MacVoices. MacVoices is supported by Take Control Books, one of the very best sources of clear, concise information on not only Apple's various operating systems, but also key Apple and third-party utilities and more. Visit TakeControlBooks.com and start your library today. Last article I have for tonight, and this one's just for me, but this is from Apple Insider. It's not just Epic that's mad about Apple's external payment commissions in the U.S. So Epic, and I'm quoting here from the write-up on it, Epic has been joined by Meta, Microsoft, X, and Match to protest how Apple is handling App Store fees and the California anti-steering order. Even as here's the part I love. Even as Microsoft bills Xbox developers heavily, and Epic attempts to charge a 12% commission in the EU. A little irony.
You know, this is the kind of stuff that if you're writing, like a TV series on HBO Max or Prime or Netflix, and you're putting this stuff in there, the writers' room, after they came up with it, they'd be like, this is going too far, and it's too ham-fisted for our storyline. We've got to come up with something better. And yet here we are, and this is our reality.
Well, there's enough smoke going on with Apple right now that they can ignore the fires in their own kitchens. It's easy to hide that stuff. Easier to hide that stuff when you can point at the big fire across the street.
That's true.
But this goes back to a conversation we had back at MacVoices Live or two ago about how everyone, the EU, now the DOJ, is picking on Apple, meanwhile ignoring the fact that Google, that Dropbox, that Microsoft basically do a lot of the same things, and sometimes almost down to the dollar, or the amount of storage space. That I know was a big discussion at one point about, what the amount of storage space Apple gives you for free, quote unquote, for free, versus Google, versus Dropbox, versus Microsoft. And it just is fascinating. And Jeff, you maybe said it best. It's a $3 trillion company, so maybe that's why they are justified in their minds with going after them.
The money part, Chuck, is actually kind of important here too. There's things you can get away with, or things that are acceptable to do as a business, until you are seen as a monopoly, and then some of those same things are no longer appropriate, because now you can be using tactics that can actually really control a market. And what are those? Well, it depends, and you got to see it in action, and then you kind of know. And but okay, what I'm seeing here is a series of cases where companies that are doing the same thing as Apple, regardless of how close they are in size to Apple, they want to do the same thing, but they also, what's the old saying? They want to have their cake and eat it too. So they want to be able to pay less to Apple, but then treat their customers or developers the same way that Apple treats theirs, which is kind of the industry standard. But they want to have better treatment than what they're giving to their own user base.
Marty?
Yeah, I agree with you, Jeff. The thing is, I don't think Apple can use any of that in defense of its own actions. It's like when I was a kid and I went home and said, well, everybody else is doing it. I still had to explain to my parents why I was doing it, what the purpose was, how did I get into trouble, things like that. So the fact that everybody's doing it doesn't help Apple's legal defense to a greater
No,
degree.
it
Yeah.
doesn't. And here's where I see a problem for Apple in all this, because what they need to do is to be able to say, this is what it costs us to do business, therefore this is what we charge. They don't want to open their books to show those numbers. That would be incredibly bad for them strategically, but it would be just a gold mine of data for their competitors. So how do they do that? Well, they really can't. So this is a great tactic for their competitors to use to get better pricing with Apple, because they know Apple doesn't want to open the books and show those numbers.
Jeff, though, it comes back to something you said when you started this, that the definition of monopoly. I mean, I get it that there are different rules for someone who has achieved a theoretically monopolistic position than maybe for everyone else. But the way that the DOJ and others seem to be trying to redefine monopoly to suit their own purposes is very, very troublesome. In my opinion, anyway. That bothers me a lot. So, and
I think that Apple and their competitors, while this isn't going to happen, this would get cut in the writers' room as well. Apple, Google, Meta, Microsoft, all these companies, if they banded together and said, this far and no farther, your antics, dear government, of defining monopoly to suit your needs based on whatever your whims or political shiftings might be in this moment, that is over. We are not going to put up with that. Now, the implications of that are just like really scary, because now you have major companies openly running your country. But at the same time, you don't want your government just on a whim, apparently, creating new rules so that they can do as they please, to get companies to act in a way that they want, do the things that the government wants, act in ways that potentially benefit a particular politician or political party. This is an ugly, scary mess.
Well, Jeff, they have to convince a judge in a court to go along with this.
This is true. They do.
So, I mean, that's, government. That's what it is.
Yes. However, the notion of saying this is a monopoly. Okay, now this is a monopoly, and now we're going to change the definition of monopoly again just to suit specific cases. That's a very troubling action.
Well, Apple is going to argue what you just said in court.
Mm-hmm.
We've only seen the DOJ thing. Now Apple's got 60 days to reply, and they will duke it out. And it's certainly, it's certainly not guaranteed that the DOJ is going to prevail. In fact, I think most of us think they probably won't.
Yeah.
But
Mm-hmm.
prosecutorial discretion is a terrifying thing, and always has been.
It is also very expensive for us as the people that foot the bill for the government side.
But anarchy would also be not a good thing.
There's one other aspect, though, to this. And if it's out there, then again, somebody please correct me, because I have not seen it, and I just realistically can't read everything. But I am kind of surprised we haven't seen some investigative reporter, whether it's in the tech press or more in the mainstream press, dig into some of these things, or the business press, really dig into some of these things, make some of these comparisons. And I'm blowing our horn a little bit that we've made here, just because we work in this environment and we are enthusiastic about this environment, that somebody doesn't draw up a chart and say, hey, this is what somebody charges and this is what you get for it. And and to estimate if it's even possible, the cost of running the infrastructure that Apple does, and that Google does, and that Microsoft does, and that OpenAI does, and that Inflection does. Instead of chasing the sensational headlines, do some digging that could make us all better informed consumers, better informed citizens about these issues, so that when the polling time does come, we can make intelligent decisions instead of based on fear, paranoia, and what a particular party says is the right thing to do.
Well, I mean, but the thing is, honestly, fear and paranoia sell.
Yeah, you're right.
We're able
Chuck,
to.
What you're saying is what's going to play out. There's going to be discovery. Both sides are going to bring in experts and pontificate on just what you just said.
But that's not investigation, Jim. That's not investigation. That's not a theoretically objective third party coming in and saying, here's what I found and here's the data to back it up. Or here are my presumptions.
Start with this. There is no such thing as an objective third party. That does not exist.
Yeah, but you can get a lot closer than the two parties associated with the suit.
And certainly, well, that's what the judge is.
Well,
I do like the idea of the journalistic approach to this, where you have people outside the case that start doing the research. Well, how much does it cost to have hosting, web hosting or cloud hosting for the amount of content that we estimate Apple has on the App Store? Just like pick one thing. And then you look at it and say, okay, so this is what it would cost to do the whole thing through AWS. And here's what it would cost to have Microsoft do the hosting through Azure, and here's what it costs for Google to do the same thing. Okay, now we went and talked to these three enterprise level companies that set up on-premise cloud infrastructure for corporations. This is what they say it would cost to set this up and then operate it. Because then, of course, you have you have to have a building, you have to have power, and there's all the things that go along with that. So based on all of that, and based on what we know about numbers of sales, this is what we estimate it costs. Now, of course, there's a lot of conjecture here, but the fact that you're getting data from the parts of the industry that actually provide the different services, that could be a compelling piece.
Could be a very compelling piece.
I disagree. I think that's, that stuff's already known. There's lots of software that's sold outside the App Store. If you're just talking about the actual distribution, it's, pennies. It's far below what Apple is charging. And I think Apple is even conceding that, because that's not the argument they're making anymore. They're not saying, oh, we've got to pay for this infrastructure. What they're saying is we've got to pay for all the work that went into developing iOS, and now they're going to charge core technology fee. I think one of the things about that whole argument that I think to me like immediately shows that the argument that Apple is charging 30% to pay for the expense of running the App Store, then why are if that's the case, then how can it be that the largest players all pay nothing? Facebook pays nothing. Netflix pays nothing. Go down. Twitter pays nothing. Go down the list. All the biggest players. So basically, it's like Apple charges you a tax, based on your business model. If you make money by advertising, then Apple gets nothing. If you make your money by actually selling the software, then Apple's got to get their vig. What the heck?
I don't know if I swing with all that, Jim. There are too many deals that are cut for Netflix that somebody gets a piece of the action for how many views or how many.
Apple. If an app is free, it's not paid, then Apple just there's no charge to the developer.
Well, yeah, but that app is
Netflix is getting money somewhere else. Apple doesn't get that.
Yeah, but
Facebook is selling ads to make their money, so Apple gets nothing. So it depends on the business model of the app. If you're selling an app that you're like, oh, I want to make money directly and not sell my user as the product, then I've got to pay Apple. But if I'm making my money off advertising or some other side hustle, then Apple gets nothing. And my app may be downloaded hundreds of millions of times, and Apple seems to find that affordable, that they can just give me a free ride.
Yeah, but Jim, some of that I can understand. First of all, you're right. We're talking about very different business models between Netflix and Apple. But more importantly, I can see the support of free apps as being something that helps bring people to the App Store so that they can look at your app, and decide whether it's for them or not.
But the apps aren't really free.
Well,
it's how the question is how they're monetized. Facebook makes money. Netflix makes money. Amazon makes money. They just don't make it, by direct, they're making money in an indirect way. So, it's not like there's tons of money that Apple couldn't, and Apple is now making that argument and saying, oh, well, if you want to go directly, you've got to pay us this core technology fee, even if it's a free app.
Yeah, because I mean, I get that, because if I understand it correctly, if you decide to host the app on your website, you still are enjoying the benefits of what Apple does, and so you've got to pay for that, whether you're making money on that app or not.
But right now, these apps in the App Store, they're not hosting it on their website. They're using Apple's resources. It's sitting on Apple's server. It's using gobs and gobs of Apple bandwidth that Apple has to pay for. But Apple is not turning around and charging for that. Apple's eating it.
But Apple has decided that its costs associated with that, and I'm speaking for Apple here, and I have no right to do so, and somebody correct me if you think I'm wrong, but Apple has decided that the benefits to that to them are acceptable costs.
But I'm just saying that the argument that it costs Apple a lot of money to run this infrastructure, when they are giving away to the probably 95% of it or more is given away. The apps that make money is probably a tiny little percentage of the bandwidth and whatnot. Most of that expense that Apple's incurring is on apps that they're not getting any direct money from.
I think we have to agree. We have to agree to disagree here, because I hear what you're saying, and I'm saying that somebody's done a calculation that makes it acceptable. And to Apple internally.
Yeah, sure. That, nobody, if the phone doesn't have Netflix and doesn't have Amazon and doesn't, have Facebook, people won't buy that phone. That's the calculation that they've made. So basically the calculation that they've made is that Apple has power over these companies that want to sell software, and they have no power over these large, companies. So they have to give it away.
Jim, I want to revise my my big article idea based on everything you've been saying. So instead of the article being how much does it cost Apple to do all of this, we've got all the numbers. How much is it costing all the developers of paid apps to subsidize the really big free apps being
Yeah.
on the App Store? And I bet a lot of people would probably flip out.
But
If
there's probably no way to do that accounting because there's
No, but
you know
wouldn't it be
there's
cool
no,
to see?
you know
We
it
could
would be
put it
totally
in Google
cool, but
Sheets.
you know that you know more
again,
numbers.
I mean, we're not going to solve this because there is no solving it. But it depends on how you look at it. I mean, I can flip the argument that Apple's supporting a lot of developers out there as they get started because they're putting free apps out there, and they get excited and they keep on
all,
going.
all I'm saying, Chuck, is that you can't go in and do an accounting basis, and you know, because Apple is not charging based on what their account costs are to run the store. They're making external decisions, like you just said, that this, you know, it benefits us to have these, you know, these apps. So, you know,
but
we're
Jim,
just going to eat those costs.
but somewhere the money's got to come from somewhere. You know, you're acting like that everything is free,
Yeah,
and it's not. It's not.
Yeah, maybe if it was based on the costs, maybe 4% might be reasonable, and even that might be, you know, most of that credit card transaction is about 3%, and 1% for hosting, probably not. I have a website. I do hosting. It costs almost nothing.
We'll continue this later because we're way over time. But yeah, I can't swing with you. I can't swing with you.
I know.
All right, let's go around the room, find out where everyone is, and then we'll get out of here, and then we'll fight this out in After Dark. Thank you, Jeff. Let's keep the order. Well, sort of, unless you've turned your camera off, and then I'm confused. David Ginsburg, thank you for being here for this cage match. Where can folks find you? You're muted, Dave.
Sorry about that. Thank you for having me, Chuck. I appreciate it. And you can find me at InTouchWithIOS, InTouchWithIOS.com. Like I said, we're getting close to our 300th episode, 299 this week, and Guy Searle will be on. And you can also find me on my YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/InTouchWithIOS. I'm on the Mac Show on the British Tech Network on Fridays, here on Tuesdays, and you can find me on Mastodon at DaveG65 at Mastodon.cloud. Thanks, Chuck.
You, Dave. Excuse me. Thank you. Lost my voice. Ben Roethig. Okay, so no outfield, maybe shortstop?
Who else has a first baseman?
Okay, we'll take what we can get. Where can folks find you when you're not talking baseball?
Well, Chuck, you can find me at Ben Roethig on social media. My writings on Roethig.tech. On Thursdays, you can find me on In Touch with iOS with Dave Ginsburg. Thursdays and Fridays on the Big and Mac shows. And today, as soon as this is over, you can find me trying to pitch the big Chuck Joyner, Jim Ray bout to DraftKings.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you.
Nice.
Good to have you. My learned opponent, Mr. Jim Ray. Jim, thank you for being here. I love the fact that we can disagree and argue and still laugh about it. Where can folks connect with you?
Well, you can find me on a web server that I completely pay for. All the it's called provue.com, PROVUE.com. I can show you the canceled checks. They're not very big. And you can also find me on Mastodon, where I don't pay anything. Although maybe I should, you know, should probably see if my host would take a contribution. And that host is Tech techhub.social. So I am ProViewJim at techhub.social.
Your profit margin must be amazing if you're not paying that much for the website, but that's another discussion. Marty Jencius, God knows what you must think of this group, but you keep coming back, and I'm so glad.
I feel so much better that Mom and Dad have stopped fighting. And you can find me at Jencius at mastodon.social here on Tuesdays, and also the Tech Savvy Professor podcast and Circular Firing Squad podcast, and anywhere else that I can get free hosting. So any other podcasts that people can give me free hosting for the time I'm there.
There you go. Thanks so much. Oh, what a night. What a night. Brian Flanigan-Arthurs, we need you to do an economic breakdown of this as maybe you can task a few of your school students to do this for us.
Sure. So glad to be here. Thank you very much. You can find me here on Tuesday evenings. In addition to that, on Mastodon, Brian8944 at mastodon.cloud.
Thank you, Brian. Good to have you as always.
Thank you.
Web Bixby, let's see. Your wife has done your ties. Your wife has done your pocket squares. I'm afraid of what the next quilt might be made of.
Well, I am too. I haven't come up with it yet. So,
where can folks connect with you, Web?
well, I'm going to give the Mastodon this week. It's WebBixby at twit.social.
Great. Thanks so much. Good to see
Thank you.
Last but absolutely not least, Mr. Jeff Gamet, who just offered apparently to carry the round card in the next cage match. We'll see how that works out.
I'm pretty sure you requested it.
Well, I made a request, not necessarily that request. Anyway, where can folks connect with you?
Oh my. Okay. How about Jay Gamet on the various social medias, Mastodon, Instagram, Threads? That's where most of my stuff goes right now. Then for shows, apparently I show up fashionably late on Tuesdays for MacVoices Live. Thank you for letting me join in. Then on Thursdays, I'm punctually there for Dave Ginsburg's In Touch with iOS. Then for the British Tech Network, Thursdays on The Big Show, Fridays on The Mac Show, and also Brad Chaffin and I do The Context Machine.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you for everything.
Oh, hugs to you.
Folks, this is MacVoices Live. I'm Chuck Joyner. We do this on Tuesday nights, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. We usually only go to for about an hour and a half, but we keep running over because the panel gets passionate about things. And I love that about this panel. Until the next time, and as always, thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Facebook group or like our Facebook page, and get more out of your Apple tech with MacVoices Magazine, free on Flipboard and on the web. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us through either our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MacVoices, or by making a one-time donation via the PayPal link on our front page and in the show notes of each episode. You will join these fine people who help bring you MacVoices. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CashFly at cashfly.com.